I often tell my students you might have to watch it twice.
Yes.
You know, this might bloom in your heart the second time you watch it, because the first time you really are just trying to figure out what's going on. You know, it's a little bit of a comedy, a little bit of a sad drama, a little bit of a science fiction film, and what is it? It's hard to nail down.
Thank you, Brett, for choosing Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind to discuss today. It's consistently ranked as one of the best movies of the 21st century, and of course, won an Academy Award for Best Screenplay.
Yeah, as I've gotten older, it has become harder and harder to pinpoint a favorite film, but if I was backed into a corner and had to answer one, it would be this one. And the reason is that I think it just captures so much about the experience of being alive and assembling your personality over decades of experience, reflecting on your memories and the way that those memories evolve. You know, we're all changing as people all the time. And I feel like this movie captures that in a way that it'd be hard to point to an equivalent that does the same.
Some viewers might wonder where this intriguing title came from. It's actually a quote from poet Alexander Pope. Eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, each prayer accepted and each wish resigned. Well, let's talk about these prayers and dreams and memories. It's also fascinating.
Yeah, you know, that quote comes from a story about a doomed love affair, where both parties, Eloisa and Abelard, went into the convent and a monastery, respectively. And this new nun is writing a letter to her former lover and expressing envy to the other nuns who never had experienced passionate romantic love, and she's envious of them. The idea that they don't have to suffer the pain of a relationship that ended. And so it's kind of a perfect setup for this story, which does not involve monasteries or convents, but it's about two regular people in the modern day living in Long Island, New York. Their one-year romance has fallen apart. He's depressed, he's heartbroken, and he learns that she has used a new technology to erase her memory of him, and he decides to do the same thing. So it's a little bit of a science fiction premise, but what it means for the audience is that we discover their relationship through his memories and dreams as they're being erased. And he decides in the moment, in his sleep, that no, he doesn't want to give up all of these seemingly bad memories. He wants to hang on to them. So this movie was released on March 19th of 2004. It was directed by Michel Gondry, who was very well known as a music video director, a commercial director. He teamed up with Charlie Kaufman, who had also had a good deal of success, but this would prove to be a career highlight really for both of them. It really just came together in a magical way. And it was, you know, a modest hit. So it was made for $20 million and it earned $74 million, which isn't bad, but when you factor marketing and all that, it's a modest financial success. It did win Best Screenplay for Charlie Kaufman.
Hi guys, congratulations.
Thanks.
To date, the only Best Screenplay award he's won. And Kate Winslet was nominated for Best Actress.
And what an all-star cast. Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet in roles that we might not have predicted for them.
Yeah, Kate Winslet commented in an interview that she plays the Jim Carrey role and Jim Carrey plays the Kate Winslet role. It is a very different role for both of them. You know, Jim Carrey became the ultimate comic actor of the 1990s. Famous for movies like Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, Dumb and Dumber, The Mask, and he had begun to dabble on the edges of drama. He had done Man on the Moon, where he's playing Andy Kaufman, the comedian from the 70s, but he's still playing a comedian, right? So it's a dramatic role where he's playing a comedian, and it's also an impressive act of impersonation. And and Jim Carrey's a famous impersonator.
Yes.
This movie, though, is the first time he's just playing a guy, a regular guy, and in fact, an introverted, sad, depressed guy. And that was very, very surprising, and nobody who knew Jim Carrey was expecting that he had this in him. And it's one of the most magical things about the movie, I think, to see an actor doing something completely different from what we expect.
My name is Joel Barish, and I'm here to erase Clementine Kretinsky.
And it's not exactly Titanic for Kate either.
No, it's not Titanic for Kate, exactly. You know, she has jokingly described herself as sort of an English rose, and that's always how she was cast. And here she's playing a frankly sort of neurotic, somewhat screwed up, very, very messy American character. You know, her hair color changes with the wind, which actually becomes very important in understanding the nonlinear structure of the story. If you wanted to be critical, you could say she's playing a certain version of a manic pixie dream girl, which is a bit of a trope. But I think if she is, she's playing the best one that has ever been captured on film, and maybe one of the original ones. And she's a deep character as well.
Yes.
And then we have the supporting cast, Mark Ruffalo, Elijah Wood, and Kirsten Dunst.
These bumbling technicians, you know, you might imagine a science fiction premise, you're having your memories erased with a machine. That would take place in some sterile environment with very serious, you know, people in white lab coats being,
But no, they're
being very
picnicking.
serious. No, they're in his apartment while he sleeps, he's drugged, and they have their own internal dynamics and romances and conflicts happening. They are not who you would hope is taking care of you when you're unconscious having a medical procedure.
No.
And that can be a lot for an audience to take in. The movie is told out of sequence. You go into a flashback without any of the kind of conventional signals. Nobody says 1 year earlier or
Yes.
anything like that, right? You're just adrift in this story. I think most viewers don't figure out till about halfway through that the opening scene of the movie was actually in the future of the timeline of the movie. But his memory has already been erased, and now he is coincidentally meeting Clementine again for the first time. We think they're meeting right now. Just from a storytelling point of view, I love how this scene gives us deep insights into their personalities and their characters, not through exposition, but just through the awkward initial interactions that they have, where she is clearly somebody who, hey, I see you, I don't know you, but I'm gonna talk to you. And he, like, talking to a stranger might be the most frightening thing that
He's
Joel can imagine,
scuffing
right?
his foot.
His every impulse is to retreat back into his drawing. From here, after this 15 minutes of getting to know these characters where we feel like we're in a sweet, romantic movie, it fades to black, it comes back up, and suddenly Joel is sobbing in his car.
Yes.
The title sequence runs. We assume the first time we're watching the film, oh, we must have started at the beginning of their relationship and now we're at the end. But in fact, what's happened is we've just gone back a couple of days to right before he has the procedure. So at this moment in the movie, we see him going home. He's being followed by a mysterious white van. We can hear the voices of people, like they sound like FBI agents. Like, okay, we've spotted him. There he is. He's going into the apartment. He goes inside. He takes a pill. Next thing you know, he's unconscious, and these people are letting themselves into his apartment. So now we've shifted gears from a light romantic meet cute to something that feels almost sinister, like a science fiction
What are they doing to
thriller
him?
premise. Yeah.
And those scenes in this whole non-linear film just that stick out in your mind, like Jim Carrey in the kitchen sink, or the two of them lying out on the ice on the Charles River. From these snowy landscapes to these kind of warm domestic interiors, they really stick in your mind.
They do. There's so many unforgettable images in this film. And it is, it's not a typically romantic film, right? It's gritty, it's small scale, it's winter, so it's frequently kind of overcast or a little rainy. Even when they're out on the beach in Montauk, which is a beautiful place, They're there in February. So there's a sense memory that comes with it. The feeling of walking on a beach when the wind is blasting you in the face and there's snow over the sand. That's a very distinct, specific memory that isn't one we necessarily associate with romance. What you were just referencing, the scene where they're lying on the ice. What a Charlie Kaufman scene that is, you know? He's a dark guy, right? And he's frequently writing scripts about the painful emotions, about loss and alienation and isolation. Michel Gondry, on the other hand, maybe a bit more optimistic, fun-loving, and whimsical. And so you put them together and you wind up with this really delightful scene of Joel and Clementine running out onto a frozen river, and that's where they're falling in love. You know, they're lying on the ice, and the whole time Joel, who's more nervous, you know, and cautious.
He doesn't really want to go out there.
He doesn't want to go out there. He's afraid he's going to fall through the ice, where Clementine is very impulsive, impetuous, hungry for adventure, and she's dragging him out there. And so without dialogue or exposition really, we're learning who these characters are. Right. We're seeing them in an unfamiliar situation, a frozen river at night, but it's beautiful and it's romantic. And the image that becomes the poster image is the two of them lying on this frozen ice with a giant crack next to it. And one of the things she does is reassure him again and again, it's frozen solid, it would never crack. Well, I see a crack right there. And to me, that is kind of what this movie is all about. It's like there are gonna be cracks in the relationship. There are gonna be cracks in our lives. And do you take the risk or do you stay at the edge of the river and not jump in?
So life is complicated, and in the end, this film is more about hope than logic, I think. And in fact, some of the illogical elements are these practical, filmmaking tricks that are played. Tell us a little bit about those.
Right. So what sets Michel Gondry apart as a director, perhaps more than anything else, is his love of doing complex visual effects practically in front of the camera without the need for post-production effects. In his view, this makes the effect feel grounded, textured, real, and it's also better for the actor because the actor is seeing the effect happen before their eyes. They don't have to look at a green screen and imagine what's going to be there 6 months from now in the editing.
How do you make it rain inside a house? How does a character look out the window of a restaurant straight into the interior of a bookstore? Well, you have to build those places rather than compositing them together. It's a handmade, physical aesthetic that I think the audience feels and appreciates, whether they think about it consciously or not. And it's one of my favorite aspects of this movie.
Practical effects.
Practical effects, yeah.
Okay.
Let's see how it's done by the master.
Yes, okay. Joel as a 4-year-old underneath the table.
Most filmmakers, I think,
Tasked with having a pint-size adult, Jim Carrey, would have used visual effects, right? Would have used green screen, compositing to place him in there. But Michel Gondry didn't do that. What he did was he built a set that had forced perspective so that the table itself gets bigger and bigger and bigger the farther away it is from the camera, so that when Joel is sitting under it, he looks like he's half the size that he's supposed to be.
Who am I?
Mrs. Hamlin.
Right, Mrs. Hamlin.
I must be about 4. Oh my gosh.
And when Clementine is standing in front of the table, she looks like a full-size adult person, twice his size.
So he's under the table?
All she has to do, without cutting the camera, without any post-production at all, is run around behind the table, crawl under with him, and suddenly she's his size. It's really brilliant. Some of these ideas, some of these in-camera tricks were invented over 100 years ago in the early days of cinema when they didn't have the option of any post-production. In fact, they'd hardly developed the language of editing. They were experimenting with what cameras and lenses and sets could do. And so, in a way, Gondry is very inventive. In another way, he's reaching back to before we had all these technological solutions to find a more organic, textured, physical solution that the actors themselves can participate in while they're performing which I think just gives this movie its unique texture.
So much better.
They're always running from one place to another
Yeah.
as the memory collapses around them.
Yeah. Like in the train station where things suddenly disappear.
Absolutely, yeah. There are numerous ways that Gondry communicates the collapse. Sometimes it's by the set actually falling away and disappearing around them.
Like when he's running out of the bookstore.
Yeah, absolutely. He runs out of the bookstore in the scene where he first realizes that Clem no longer remembers him. And he runs directly from the bookstore into his friend's apartment. The friends who are going to finally let him know what Clementine has done. That's how he finds out. Those two sets had to be built together on a soundstage so that without cutting the camera, Jim Carrey could run from the bookstore and be right back in the apartment. One of the simplest but most effective techniques he uses is just shining a spotlight on the characters as they run around, which causes the background to just drift to darkness. Gondry is building sets that mimic the journey of memory that Joel is on.
Amazing.
Yeah. We're discovering this love affair backwards from the bad memories that caused him to want to erase her, gradually into the good memories. And not real memories necessarily, but dreams of memories, subject to interpretation, subject to rewriting. But in the course of the movie, the overall arc is that Joel discovers, I can't let go of these memories of Clementine. The good ones or the bad ones, they're all worth keeping.
So there's some subplots in here too
Yes.
that are kind of comedic, but also poignant.
There's an assistant named Mary who has a relationship with Stan, the head technician. But what we find out through the course of the film is that she had previously had an affair with the scientist, Dr. Howard, who invented this. This is actually where we get the quote from the movie. Charlie Kaufman puts it in the mouth of Mary.
I found it in my Bartlett's.
What's your Bartlett's?
It's a quote book, Patrick. It's a book of quotations.
I think Howard will be in Bartlett's one day.
She brings up this quote because she read it in a book of quotes. And she starts Bartlett's, yeah, and she says to Dr. Howard, "Do you like quotes?" Which is just such a silly thing to ask, but it winds up being quite profound.
What do you mean?
Oh, you know, like famous quotes. I find reading them inspirational, and in my reading, I've come across some I thought you might like too. The quote goes, "How happy is the blameless vessel's lot? The world forgetting by the world forgot. Eternal sunshine of a spotless mind. Each prayer accepted, and each wish resigned."
She learns that she herself has had the memory of a previous affair with Dr. Howard erased. And finding that out is the reason that she decides she's got to kind of be a whistleblower here. And she collects all these tapes and notifies every single customer, every client of the doctor, what had happened to them. And that brings us to the end of the movie. So, spoiler alerts, I suppose. We're back in the present day. Clementine and Joel have learned that they've been through all of this before.
This is weird.
To all patients of Dr. Howard Mearswack, my name is Mary Spivo.
We've met, but you don't remember
but you
me.
don't remember me.
I worked for a company you hired to have part of your memory erased.
Mary mails them the tapes that they recorded when they chose to have the memory erasure procedure. So it's 2 tapes of the 2 of them talking about all the terrible things about their relationship.
So it's really about regret.
Imagine your first date and you've had a wonderful day together and you come home and you just want to bask in the glow of having met someone new and exciting. And then there are these tapes waiting for you that feel like a message from the future where you're hearing every bad thing you're likely to eventually think about this person. It's heartbreaking, right? It's heartbreaking. And that is the final obstacle thrown in the path of Joel and Clementine as they try to meet each other, you know, and they fight through it and they just say, okay.
I'm not perfect.
I can't see anything that I don't like about you.
But you
Right
will.
now, I can't.
But you will. You know, you will think of things, and I'll get bored with you and feel trapped because that's what happens with me.
Okay.
Okay.
That one word, okay, is just so underwritten and yet contains so much.
I'm gonna marry you.
Okay.
If you want to be with me, you're with me.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
You know, this is just a love story. This is a movie we can all relate to. It's a movie about memory and a movie about dreams. And all of us are building our lives out of memories right now. You know, the past doesn't exist tangibly. It only exists the way we hold it in our minds and in our souls. And what I think this movie reminds us is that that changes. You know, that a happy memory can become tinged with sadness if circumstances change. A sad memory or a difficult memory can start to seem like an adventure later in life. And this is how our memories really work, right? Like, our memories are not linear in our minds. They're connected by sensory experiences. And when you let your mind wander, which is what happens in your dreams, right? The connections are emotional, they're sensory, they're not logical, and they're not linear. That storytelling is just so magnificent here. They had to commit to it. It couldn't all be experimentation in the editing room, right? There's a design, but it feels effortless, and it feels organic, and it feels like your mind wandering through your own memories.
It's brilliant and timeless.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this film. It's among my very favorite films, and I feel like I could talk about it for hours.
Thank you. I'd love to learn from you.
Likewise.